It's Wednesday, September 9th, and time for your Barbados Today news update. The African Heritage Foundation is turning up the pressure on government to change laws to allow the Rastafarian community to use cannabis in their places of worship, including their homes. As such, the foundation's president, Paul Simba-Rock, has announced the launch of the civil society group, Cannabis Barbados, which he said would be a voice for the people.
But I think that the voice of the people, needs to be heard. And outside of the farms, the industry, the cannabis industry overall, not just the medicinal industry, you have recreational use, and that is a big industry. When the government comes to that realization towards that eventually, but as I said before, eventually doesn't work for me. So I think that the time to seek liberation is always now, so that in a nutshell is Cannabis Barbados, and we want to invite persons to come on board, to join the movement, to join Cannabis Barbados, and help us with the initiatives and the things that we have to do, or we intend to do, as it pertains to cannabis education, cannabis justice, cannabis equality.
Speaking during one of the foundation's virtual sessions on the topic cannabis legislation, a matter of constitutional and human rights, Rock said that the continued prohibition of cannabis in Barbados was nothing more than a tyranny and oppression, adding that human rights were being infringed instead of protected by the law.
And in the light of our Black Lives Matter environment, this matter of cannabis legalization is very, very important. Jamaica, St. Vincent, and increasingly more in countries are trying to find a way to deal with the demand from civil society to regulate the market. Very often, they opt for the medical cannabis option, which of course not entirely useful for the demands of the society, but it is a first step. But the first step most take is to decriminalize people who use cannabis. That is very important. I spoke about that earlier. Almost all, if not all, the other countries and islands, their first step was to sort of decriminalize, people like myself who use cannabis. Jamaica was one of the first to do it, and an increasing number of countries are doing it.
Minister of Agriculture and Food Security Indawe has pledged to expand the scope of the Barbados Agricultural Development Marketing Corporation beyond the retail of chicken and turkey wings. He made the pledge during the launch of a training program for the second cohort of the Farmers Empowerment and Enfranchisement Drive at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center. Noting that the newly trained stock of farmers would significantly improve the country's food security, Ware stressed that it would be all for naught if there was no space for primary agricultural crops to be developed into secondary products.
And these are the things that we are grappling with to make sure that when this program is executed, you're not just planting and growing for the sake of so doing, but that you're doing so with a purpose. And that purpose must be driven through the plans of the BADMC to get involved in further agro-processing, using cassava to produce flour, sweet potato to produce our sweet potato porridges and other things. And that we have to reach the point where we really test ourselves. And when we test ourselves, all of us in here who consume steamed pudding, can't go nowhere in no supermarket and buy it and push it in the microwave every evening and say, well, I feel like eating some steamed pudding, so take that. You can't. And why are we so far behind? Why is it that you can't go and buy some fish cake batter made from cassava flour or sweet potato? From in your supermarket or from at car meters? And just go home and just fry fish cakes.
The minister revealed that a business plan was now being developed by the state-owned entity.
They are now going to launch a marketing department that is going to reach out to the diaspora. And why are we doing this? We're doing this because we recognize that primary agriculture cannot sustain us. Most of what we are doing right now is hobbyist activity. And that a farmer will not be motivated unless he can increase production and see clearly how he's making money. And that is the role of a BADMC, Barbados Agriculture Development and Marketing Corporation. Do you understand what that means? That the reality of Barbados punching above its weight as we did in the past has now fall upon us again. Because whilst we never planned COVID, we have to plan how we can survive it.
One of Barbados's leading fund managers is highlighting the importance of having a well-diversified portfolio over a long term. At the same time, Chief Investment Officer of Fortress Fund Managers, Peter Arender, said it was critical to take on a level of measured risk despite the ongoing challenging economic environment. He shared the advice during a virtual session on Tuesday, where he reported reasonably positive returns for the company's investment portfolios over the past 2 months.
Our Caribbean Growth Fund was up about 7.5% in the second quarter. Our high interest fund was up 4% in the second quarter. And then since June 30th, the gains have generally continued. We're up about another 3% in the Caribbean Growth Fund since June 30, which puts the fund down about 3 or 4% since this time last year. Not a great result in terms of absolute return, but we think in the face of what's going on in the overall world, when you think of what's been absorbed in that portfolio, it actually we're reasonably gratified with that holding of value. The high interest fund is up another 1% since June 30, and that puts it up approximately 3% since this time last year. Again, both of those funds quite as diversified as they can be globally by issuer. And I think many of our investors come to us via company pension plans, and it's important to note as well that our pension shares of our pension fund invest in a combination of equities and fixed income. And that extra measure of diversification means that most pension investors are going to be about flat over the last year.
Pointing to the importance of taking on risks, the investment expert explained that in order to do that now, the focus had to be on longer-term investments.
If you're an investor unwilling to take any risk at all, your expected return on your money is now 0 or lower in many parts of the world. So no risk today equals no return. And it certainly doesn't imply, therefore, that you take risks completely randomly. What it means, I think, is that we need to be very, very sensible and selective about the kinds of risks that we take. But it really focuses the mind on the need to assume some risk in a portfolio. And in order to do that, we need to focus as long-term as we can. So during the worst parts of the market weakness in March and April, we really focused a lot of our energy on communicating with clients about the need to think long-term about the way the portfolios were behaving in that time.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
In regional developments now, business owners are appealing for unease as Trinidad and Tobago's Finance Minister Carl Imbert gets ready to present the first budget of the new Keith Rowley administration on October 5th. We get more in this report from TV6 News.
On the business front, Gregory Abood, president of the Downtown Owners and Merchants Association, says his membership has one wish: no added burdens. Speaking with TV6, Mr. Booth says while a huge sector of the economy pays no taxes, the production sector have been bearing the load of government's revenue. He says, quote, persons employed the salaried cohort of state and private sector have been contributing taxes while companies and businesses pay income tax and value-added tax, end quote. Mr. Booth recognizes the discussion raises anxiety levels of the population and government. He says, quote, I hope the minister would not be tempted by the imposition of taxes without significant improvement in the ease of doing business and the facilitation of new investment in TNT.
And finally, to news on the international scene, the entire police leadership of a city in New York State has resigned as more details emerge about the death of an African-American man who was hooded and detained by police officers earlier this year. More from Reuters TV.
Amid growing scrutiny over Rochester's handling of the arrest of Daniel Prude and the investigation into his death, the city's police chief, LaRon Singletary, abruptly announced his retirement on Tuesday. Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren told a city council meeting that she did not ask for Singletary to step down.
As you all know, this has been very challenging times for the city of Rochester. And the chief was not asked to give his resignation because I do believe that he's given his very best. And there was some information that was brought to light today that I had not previously seen before.
Warren, who has also come under pressure since video of Prude's death was released, said Singletary's deputy, Joseph Morabito, had also retired and said, quote, there may be a number of others that will decide to leave as well. Rochester, a city of 200,000 people in northwestern New York State, erupted with protests last week after the Prude family released body camera footage showing officers had used a spit hood over Prude's face and pinned him to the pavement to restrain him. He later died. The release of the footage, 5 months after his death, had raised questions of a cover-up and turned Rochester into the latest flashpoint in a summer of protests over racial injustice, first sparked by the May 25th death of George Floyd.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.